I had always prided myself on being someone who didn't fail, or at least that's what I convinced myself of. Growing up, failure was not something I accepted easily. It wasn't a part of my identity. I was the person who always had a plan, who always worked hard, who was always the go-to person in school, at work, and in my social circle. I was used to succeeding, to winning. I had learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to work for it. And work I did. Every project, every task, every challenge was met with the same dedication and focus. I didn't allow room for failure. I was afraid of it, honestly. The idea that I might not succeed, that I might fall short of my expectations, was a concept I couldn't wrap my mind around. But when I turned 24, life had a different lesson in store for me. It was a lesson I had been avoiding for years, one I never saw coming. It was the kind of lesson that once learned changes you forever. And it all began with one of the most embarrassing and humbling experiences of my life. It started with a project at work. It was supposed to be my big break, the project that would elevate me, that would prove to my colleagues, and perhaps to myself, that I was ready for the next step. It was one of those high-stakes, high-visibility tasks where everyone is watching you, waiting to see how you handle the pressure. I threw myself into it with everything I had. I worked late nights, put in extra hours, made plans, drew up strategies, and gave it my all. This was my moment. I could feel it. I was going to knock this out of the park. But as the project progressed, things started to unravel. I missed a deadline. I forgot an important detail. I tried to fix it, but it wasn't enough. The cracks in the foundation I had built began to show, and they grew wider and wider. The final presentation was a disaster. I stood in front of my team, knowing that I had failed. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It wasn't just the fact that I had missed the mark. It was the way my colleagues looked at me, the disappointment in their eyes, the awkward silence that followed. It wasn't a small mistake. It was a big one, and I felt the weight of it sinking deep into my chest. The embarrassment was unbearable. I remember walking out of that meeting feeling like the world was spinning, as if the earth beneath me had cracked open and swallowed me whole. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to fix it. I had never failed so publicly. Sure, I had made mistakes before, but they were small, manageable mistakes, the kind you could learn from without the whole world watching. This was different. This was bigger. This felt like a failure of who I was, not just a mistake in what I had done. In the days that followed, I went into a bit of a tailspin. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. The shame of that failure consumed me. I couldn't escape it. Every time I walked into the office, I felt like everyone was silently judging me. I replayed the presentation over and over in my head, torturing myself with thoughts of what I should have said, what I could have done differently. The more I thought about it, the worse it became. The doubt and shame spiraled. I couldn't believe I had let myself fail in such a spectacular way. It was like my entire identity had been built on my success, and now, with one misstep, that identity felt shattered. I wanted to quit. I wanted to leave the office, pack up my things, and never come back. I wanted to disappear into the background where no one could see my failure. But I knew that running away wasn't the answer. It wasn't going to solve anything. So instead of quitting, I did the hardest thing I had ever done. I apologized, not just to my team, but to myself. It felt uncomfortable. It felt awkward. But I had to do it. I had to face the fact that I wasn't perfect. I had to admit that I was human, that I could make mistakes, and that those mistakes didn't define me. I had been so afraid of failure for so long, and now here I was, staring it right in the face. And the only way through it was to own it, to stand up and say, I made a mistake and I'll learn from it. What surprised me the most about that apology wasn't the relief I thought I'd feel. In fact, it wasn't until a few weeks later that I realized what had really happened. I had begun to change. I had allowed myself to fail, and in doing so, I had allowed myself to grow. For the first time in my life, I was learning that failure wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a part of the process. It was a lesson, not one that I wanted, but one that was necessary for my growth. I began to see that failure wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to embrace. Every failure held an opportunity for growth, for learning, and for becoming a better version of myself. I started to understand that I didn't have to be perfect. In fact, I never would be. But that didn't make me any less capable or any less valuable. The weeks that followed were tough. I had to rebuild my confidence. I had to relearn how to trust myself. But with each small step forward, I began to understand what it meant to truly grow. I wasn't growing by achieving success. I was growing by accepting my mistakes and learning from them. I realized that my mistakes didn't define me. What defined me was how I handled them, how I picked myself up, and how I kept going despite the setbacks. That experience was a turning point for me. It taught me that failure wasn't something to fear. It was something to learn from. It was something to embrace. The pressure to always succeed, to always be perfect, to always get it right was exhausting, and I was finally ready to let that pressure go. I didn't have to succeed every time. I didn't have to be the best every time. I just had to keep trying, keep learning, and keep moving forward. Now, I don't see failure the same way. I don't see it as a reflection of my worth or an indication that I'm not good enough. I see it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to try again, and a reminder that I'm human. I've learned that failure doesn't define me, how I respond to failure does. And every time I fail, I get a little stronger, a little wiser, and a little more capable of handling whatever life throws my way. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown because of that experience. I've learned to embrace failure, to let go of the need for perfection, and to trust in myself even when things don't go as planned. I still have moments of doubt, still have times when I question myself, but now I understand that failure is just part of the process. It's not something to fear, but something to learn from. And that, more than anything, has been the greatest lesson of all.